Good morning, my friends from around the world. Welcome back to Cafecito con Colon. Hope you had a great weekend. It is a beautiful Monday morning, the 13th day of July, and it's already about 82 degrees out there. We'll hit 100 today, or at least 99 for sure. And boy, we're coming off a hot weekend, record temperatures. I hope you were able to stay cool. I know, Brandi, you were hot in the East Mountains, weren't you?
Yeah.
Hot over there with Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You betcha. All right, we got about a minute or two that we get started here. I'll post up some links and then we'll bring the incredible Brandi Stone to camera for a great visit this morning on Cafecito con Colon.
Mommy.
All right, we got another guest of honor this morning, right, Brandi?
Yes, and I'm so sorry. I'm just going to put that out there for the public. I have a 2-year-old, and today he wants to be right next to me. So
absolutely. He's welcome on Cafecito con Colon. What's his name?
Alonzo.
Alonzo. Good morning, Alonzo.
He's shy.
Now he'll get shy, see? We want to see that little guapito, the camera, before it's all over. We want to meet Alonzo. All right. It is exactly 9 o'clock on Cafecito con Colon. Thanks to all my extrovert therapists who dropped by to say good morning and to meet Miss Brandi Stone. Good morning there, Sergeant Jaramillo. Good morning, Tammy, coming in from Cuesta, Condado de Taos. Good morning, Jonathan Jones. Good to see you this morning. And Dr. Roy Ball, glad you're all here. Carlos, good to see you this morning, buddy. Latanya, thank you for coming. Donna, good to see you every morning on Cafecito con Colon. And Dr. Lang, good morning. And she says, good morning, Brandi Stone. So great, we are ready to go. Let's put up a couple of good links on this 13th day of July. I've got several to put up, and then we're going to go to Brandi, and we're going to maximize our opportunity to learn the lived experience of this New Mexico superstar who's making a difference specifically at UNM, but really broadly in the community, because when you make a difference in the lives of young people at the University of New Mexico, you're actually impacting the entire community, because that's where change is made. So thank you, Brandi, for your great work. I am thrilled to have you on this morning. Good morning, Shannon. And I didn't mean to interrupt you, Brandi. You're welcome to pipe in anytime here. That's perfect. Especially when taking a sip of coffee, that's the best time, because then I can't interrupt you. Thanks for that. And I know that Brandi and Dr. Roll very, very well. I'm sure you had him with a good doctor over the years, and Lawrence is the force behind Enlighten Mexico, a program that changes lives, just like Brandi changes lives every day at UNM. All right. Good morning, Alexandria. Good to spend some time with you over the weekend as we Zoom get all different things. All right, let me get to some links here. Some good stuff this morning. I'll start. I'm not big on the sports. I think it's important. The owner never seen the name of his team. He grew up rooting for and owning. The owner of the Washington NFL team has announced that they will change the name of their team. And I'll say what that is going to be. That is an important movement, because he's refused to have that conversation in the last 5 years. And I'm getting feedback here, not sure why. Let's see here. Can you hear me okay now?
You're kind of choppy, but I don't know if it's I don't know if I'm coming off the same way.
I think we are having some issues with sound this morning, which is always disappointing. I don't want them to miss a word I have to say. Why don't you stay right there? I'm going to tune back in. You stay right there. Brandi, I hope that's a little bit better.
Yeah, it sounds a lot better.
Okay, great. Well, then we will go with that. And we are. And there I am again. Okay, let me put up some links here real quick. And Brandi, they're saying you sound terrific. So no problem on your side. It's all on mine. And everybody's already commenting on that wonderful blouse you've got on. That's so nice. Okay, so the other thing is today starts the week when taxes are due. So you got that new tax deadline. And thank you, Hanik. There's a story about how to file an extension. If you want one till October, you can still get one. There's the ins and outs of that. Otherwise, you are due on Wednesday. In terms of the governor's new public health order requires that restaurants close their indoor seating and only have patio seating up to 50% of capacity. This is a great New York Times story about the distinction between potential contact of COVID-19 indoor versus outdoor, and I thought you might enjoy that. The other thing was I found on the conversation this great little 2-minute video about the severity, and it provides some great statistical data on the distinction between the gravity of flu season versus the gravity of this COVID-19 pandemic. And so I thought you might appreciate that story that is led by a statistician. And the other thing that I thought was an important story was this story about individuals contemplating the value of using their video recording as a sign of patriotism since the murder of George Floyd. And so I thought that was a fascinating story as well. And then on Global Citizen, they've done a great job of raising money for all kinds of communities. And this is a great story about their work in indigenous populations. They go over the fact that people of color and in poverty are so much more likely, twice as likely to contract COVID-19. Latinos or Hispanos and African Americans are severely getting beaten by this COVID-19 pandemic. But Global Citizen, not just the story, but the photographs are very powerful in that Global Citizen piece regarding indigenous populations and what they're doing to help address the COVID-19 pandemic. Speaking on that same note of the racial impacts, disproportionate impact of COVID-19, there's a great story on NPR. And the CDC has now made a deeper commitment to call out the agency's own toxic culture of racial aggressions. And I think that is a very powerful, it's 4 minutes if you listen to the podcast stream on there. And we're getting here to the local stories, but before we do that, this one is kind of a hybrid local national story. It's also on Global Citizen, but it speaks to the LGBTQ plus conversion therapy practice. And I just wanted to give a shout out to Senator Jacob Candelaria and all the stakeholders who led the way when it came to banning conversion therapy in New Mexico. We literally have a ban on conversion therapy in New Mexico. We're ahead of the curve on this conversation. Thank you to my dear friend Randy Royster, who was an expert witness, I believe, in committee on that very issue. He's a great ally for that community and provided some very heartfelt and powerful testimony during that legislation when it was being advanced by Senator Candelaria, and to all the other members of our 112 who advanced and passed that legislation. The other thing that is a hybrid story locally and nationally, I think one of the residual positive things to come out of the COVID-19 pandemic in New Mexico proper is an increased awareness and increased urgency on the conversation about access to broadband services for our rural communities in New Mexico, particularly our communities of poverty, our communities of color, and our Native American population. But this here story on the Optimist Daily talks about internet access and broadband being a basic human right as it relates to so many things. So I thought that was a great hybrid story, because I think that Senator Padilla has done a great job chairing the technology committee and really kind of trying to advance the conversation, but he certainly met with some resistance, and it hasn't been a priority to deliver that broadband access to some of our rural communities. And I think the COVID-19 has really put a spotlight on the urgency and the need to do so. Here is the Albuquerque Journal story regarding today's new healthcare order that has been put in place, and also about the Restaurant Association bringing suit against the administration on that point by a very well-respected and high-capacity attorney, Antonia Roybal Mack, somebody I consider a dear friend. That was in the Albuquerque Journal today, and the Santa Fe Reporter here does, as it always does, a good job of covering the new healthcare directive. In terms of great news and New Mexico being front and center as we try and battle the COVID-19, and so many of us are pivoting, they are working diligently at NMSU on another early warning system for COVID-19 and for individuals who are trying to detect and deploy systems that can help us monitor highly exposed populations and circumstances such as classrooms, hospitals, senior centers, and things like that. And MSU, thank you to that Division I research institution for doing a good job on this issue. I highlighted last week the fundraiser going on with Vintage Albuquerque. Today, I wanted to point out that the New Mexico Philharmonic will have another Wednesday night live event where they feature an artist and put on a concert streaming online. And there's a link to that if you're available on Wednesday. And here's a great story from KOB4 about the downtown market and its reopening and the phases it's going through to survive during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then here's a great story, as always, KRQE covering good news. This is a local fabric store, Stitchology, is selling hot pads to their customers, and the proceeds are going to the Roadrunner Food Bank. As you know, the Roadrunner Food Bank has been doing a great job of stepping up its capacity to serve our community. And with that, I am very fortunate to have a fantastic guest of honor. And I've had a relationship with just about every single person I've had on Cafecito con Colon. And if not a relationship, a touch point. And Brandi Stone is no different. About 6 or 7 years ago, when I was serving as, I believe, president of the UNM Alumni Association, I had the distinct honor and privilege of recognizing her phenomenal leadership and capacity by giving her one of our alumni awards. And I was proud to do that. And that's where our paths first crossed in a substantial way. And it's great to be able to bring her to Cafecito con Colon. Let me tell you about this phenomenal leader. And Brandi serves as the Director of African American Student Services and Special Advisor to the President, President Stokes, for African American Affairs at the University of New Mexico. She has been there for 7 years already, and I know that you're going to think that that might violate some child labor laws because she just doesn't look like she could already be at this professional career for that long, but she's been making a difference for a long time at NMS or at UNM. And let me tell you, she is a perfect example of the importance of some of our programs that we have federally and locally that really diversify our workforce and give young people an opportunity to engage in impact work. Because Brandi started her work at the University of New Mexico, and I believe at African American Student Services as a work study student. And I know that when I was a teenager and a very young New Mexican who did not have a support system and only financial aid to try and be the first in my family to go to college, I too was the beneficiary of the work study program at New Mexico State University that was funded nationally. And Brandi got her start, I believe, at African American Student Services in that work study program. She's passionate about, listen to this, folks, she is passionate about creating a community inclusive of Black student scholars and cultivating a culture of Black excellence. And we've talked a lot about Black excellence over the last 7 weeks on Cafecito con Colon. When all my extrovert therapists come on every day, they know that I am all about lifting up that Black excellence. And Brandi is part of that New Mexico story of Black excellence. She pursues her passion with her team in African American Student Services through collaboration with Black alumni, the community, and many, many campus partners like Dr. Jennifer Gomez Chavez, Dr. Lawrence Roybal, and then advising directly to the president of the University of New Mexico, President Stokes. Brandi, she also serves on the national board for the Association of Black Cultural Centers, what they call the ABCCs, where she's responsible for communicating the unique needs of Black students in the Southwest region and assisting in the development and shared standards for Black cultural centers at the national level. She is a New Mexico native. We're going to ask her where she was born and raised, because that's part of that lived experience that we're trying to wrap our heads around so that we can better understand the journey of Black people in New Mexico and that rich history. As a native New Mexican, she got her bachelor's in political science and a master's degree in public administration from UNM, and she is a second generation Lobo and proud of it. She has interest in researching the role of Black culture centers in Hispanic serving institutions, that intersectionality of these issues for people of color and the lived experience for people of color. And she enjoys being outdoors, although she's trying to get outdoors early and late instead of during the hot of the day, right during the center. We talked about that earlier before we came to camera. And she's got a wonderful husband of 4 years and a beautiful son, Alonzo, who we're hoping is going to make a guest appearance on Cafecito con Colon at some point in the next 45 minutes. And it is my pleasure, my honor to bring on this UNM superstar, community leader, Brandi Stone. Brandi, welcome to Cafecito con Colon. Unmute yourself and let's get it started with some real talk.
Thank you so much.
It is so great to have you on here. Brandi, tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you were raised, and what it's like to be a second generation Lobo.
So I was born here in Albuquerque, and I moved to the East Mountains to Edgewood, New Mexico when I was like 4 or 5 years old, and grew up out there and went to school in Moriarty. And that was an interesting experience to be a little Black girl growing up in the East Mountains. I think there was probably there was about 3 or 4 Black families, and so growing up, I think we all like yearned to be around each other to build some sort of community. But I was fortunate enough to use the lottery scholarship and go to the University of New Mexico. My dad played football here shortly at UNM, and my mom came and got her degree from the School of Education. And so I think, although my dad didn't finish school, and my mom, she took 10 years, although I'm not considered a first-gen student, I had to navigate college like a first-gen student because of their experiences and how they've interacted in school and how long it took for one of them to achieve their degree. And so I'm passionate about providing access to education for others that look like me.
I love that. I love that. So you grew up to be a Pinto.
Yes.
And then a Lobo.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Earl said everyone's a Pinto. We love Moriarty, New Mexico. It is great to have you in. And if I remember correctly, that would be Santa Rosa County. Is that right? Santa Rosa is the adjacent. It would be Torrance County. Torrance County, right?
Yeah.
Torrance County. You and Santa Rosa, they're in Torrance County. And good morning, Selena. And then you've got another big fan out here who I know you've worked with very closely. Pam is with us this morning. Agoyo is with us. and she sends you a big shout out, Brandi.
Thank you. I love Pam. She's always like my when I'm feeling like down, she's like, get it together and get to work. So I love her.
She is amazing. She is a force at UNM. And Brandi, don't worry about muting yourself. I want to hear Alonzo as much as I can. I just love hearing little kids. You know, I wanted 6 children. Aleli wanted 2 or 3, and we got 1, and he's now 23. So he doesn't run around the house crying much anymore. But it's great to hear Alonzo in the background. Don't worry about muting him out.
Thank you.
Mandy, thank you for joining us as well. Tell us a little bit, I mean, Moriarty, New Mexico, Torrance County, pretty small African-American community there. Tell us what's that like for somebody like you that grew up in a community where you looked around the room and almost 100% of the time you were the only Black woman in the room. So
what makes my experience, I think, unique, but also not unique because there's so many biracial Black students across New Mexico. My mom is New Mexican Hispanic, my dad is Black. And so my mom's family is from the Galisteo-Stanley area. So that meant that I was going to school with a lot of my cousins in Moriarty, like most of the basketball team was my cousins. But there was also a large portion of, so actually let me back up and just say like in my formative years, my first experiences with race was going to kindergarten, getting on the bus, and the next day the girl's telling me, I can't sit by you because I'm Black. My mom won't let me sit by a Black girl. Or sleepover, somebody saying after like, I didn't know she was Black. So like, we're not inviting her over to sleepovers again. And so growing up, there was always this, like, I was othered, right? Even though I still like went to school with family and stuff when I got to high school, a lot of times it felt like I wasn't validated until I said, I'm also Hispanic. And so that I think definitely shaped my identity and how I identify as a Black woman, because the world has only seen me as a Black woman until I tell them that I am Hispanic or half Hispanic. So that was just always something that was interesting. And when I got to African American Student Services and got involved, I really was able to embrace like my full authentic identity, my full authentic self, because there were so many other people who looked like me who had that same experience.
That's amazing. One would like to believe that somebody of your young age wouldn't have such strong, overt racist interactions with your classmates.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's a learned behavior, right? So that's the sad part about it.
Yeah, I think that's right. And how did that form? You know, we talk about the intersectionality, and I know your passion is in working with those Black cultural centers, and specifically that intersectionality with the Hispanic community or Latino community. Clearly, being biracial, that impacted and provides that drive for you there. But what is that intersectionality and being contemplated as a Black girl growing up in Torrance County? How did that lead you to the work you do today?
Well, I think once I got to college and I found African American Student Services, my first experience was the Welcome Back barbecue, and it was an alpha who handed me a flyer, and I was just like so excited to see a flyer with like more than 3 Black people. So I went and I was just like, oh, finally, like there's others, you know, that have my same experiences. And so I think also carrying a political science and criminology degree helped me put some words to how I had been feeling, understanding microaggressions. But my mom's an educator. My family, my dad's side grew up in the church. I think I was always meant to give and to always serve. I thought I was gonna do constituent service work after I graduated, and my director, Scott, asked if I was interested in student affairs work, and I didn't understand that those were basically the same thing. And so I think it just naturally was my passion. But now in my work, what I love about it is that I can bring all those intersections of Blackness for students and allow them to be comfortable in it. And what I love is like the first day seeing like East Coast Black students with West Coast Black students, with New Mexico Black students, with Colorado Black students, and the dialogue that they have about like there's still a shared experience, right? In that, and it's okay, and it's awesome to be like proud in your Black experience and how it contributes to the larger experience. So I think that's what I've loved about my work so far.
And tell us if have you found any common threads? I mean, you are really at the epicenter of gathering data points and lived experiences by college students, specifically at our flagship Division I institution. Uh, what are the common threads, or what would be important for our viewers to kind of really understand what that lived experience might be like? At least, you know, I know that we always say, and frankly, people of color are always really good at saying, you know, this is my experience. I don't speak for all Hispano, folks. I don't speak for all Latinos, and I don't speak for all Blacks. And I know that disclaimer still exists, but you're in that unique slot where you actually take in and have got firsthand account of the Black experience for those folks that are on our largest campus in New Mexico and our largest student body outside of CNM in terms of higher ed.
Yeah, so I think largely the experience is, well, still a marginalized experience, right? So you still are one or two of a classroom of 50 to 100. There are not a lot of Black faculty that look like you. There are not a lot of spaces in Albuquerque that feel like you. And so we have to make sure that we're intentionally showing our Black students where Black community members and Black community spaces are so that they can acclimate. And that's really important to the work so that they will be retained. Another thing is like the microaggressions, right? And even I think that there's a lot of microaggressions in the classroom that don't get reported. And so when we're unpacking these conversations, students sometimes at first in their freshman, sophomore year aren't understanding that those are microaggressions because they've lived for so long being the one or two of. And so we're giving them the tools and the framework to understand how that's actually violence to their community and to their identity, and how do they respond to those types of things. And so it's awesome to see those freshmen then as juniors and seniors out there and being strong leaders and teaching the freshmen and sophomores again of what that looks like.
And do you have that collaborative approach where it's peer-to-peer and those juniors are now talking and visiting with those freshmen and sophomores? Because we know that science-based and data-driven research really supports the idea of whether it's in mental health or substance abuse issues that we're trying to mitigate. We know that peer-to-peer is such a strong platform and model.
Yeah, and we saw it work out beautiful this summer, you know, in light of Black Lives Matter. We have a Black Student Association, which is comprised of various Black student leaders at all levels. And as the university and the world is sending these solidarity statements, sorry, got a piano going too loud on the side. As the university and the world and, you know, all the culture that we're consuming is sending out these Black Lives Matter statements, the seniors were warning the freshmen to not buy into just the statement and that you need to ask for the action and you need to hold that part accountable. And so that was really neat to see, you know, them mentoring those freshmen and then those freshmen saying, oh, okay, I get it. How do we keep going?
That's awesome. That's very, very powerful. So the microaggression piece, I know that's something we've talked quite a bit about over the last 7 weeks on Cafecito, as we've only lifted up and amplified Black voices. Tell us a little bit about that, and maybe some of those microaggressions that you have heard about that maybe have some recurrence, and to help us even better understand with some concrete examples that go on even in a setting that is supposed to be a setting of a more highly intellectual universe of individuals. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
So just pulling up the definition. So it says microaggression is a term used for brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, or environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional. And a lot of times we see this with Black students when they're walking into a room and they're presenting, or they're in a meeting and after somebody says, wow, you are really articulate, or wow, you did, you know, you spoke so well, you were so well. So like those things that, why would you say that to any other student in the room that was speaking, like, you know, some of those is you're very pretty for a Black girl, or are you a student athlete because you're wearing sweats and you're a Black male walking into the classroom? So those small things are what we're trying to teach students are not normal and they're not okay. And we need to, and Alonzo's coming into the conversation.
Alonzo, what's up, dude? Nice to see you, Alonzo.
Let me see, he's waving, but he's not all the way to the camera. So can you wave?
Hey, buddy, good to see you.
So those are the type of microaggressions that students are experiencing in the classroom and just in their daily experiences.
I appreciate that. I think those are some of the things we've heard about, and I think it's always good to have those as reminders. Whether it's seeking Brian Jaramillo, who's on here today, wonderful educator, who we can all be better allies by calling out that behavior when we see it. And then we can also be more sensitive so that we don't engage in it because it is so commonplace. It is so part of what's been acceptable for so long that we have to be intentional about the way we respond in those given sets of circumstances. And we can't expect Black women and men to be the only ones to try to address or mitigate these horrible circumstances. Unless allies engage, we will forever have the issue because the problem is not yours, the problem is ours. You don't create a microaggression, you don't commit a microaggression against me. I mean, regardless of what you think of my red hair and freckles, I typically don't have to deal with microaggressions. And so the problem is here, not there, so to speak. And so, educators like Aleli and Brian and his wife and so many great people who've committed their lives to impacting young people in a positive way, we have to hear this so that it becomes part of our ingrained subconscious about how important it is to call it out and make sure that we never engage in it. And if we do, to own it, take responsibility for it, mitigate it with sincere apology, and then do better because we know better now.
Absolutely. I wish that this was like a topic that was discussed at the elementary level, right? Because I think those first experiences come in your like formative educational experience with teachers who might not understand saying like, Jamal, be quiet, and everybody else is talking, right? But you said his name instead of others, or those girls saying like, your hair is this or that. So I think everything that we're doing, we have to keep going lower is the reality, I think.
I think that's right. I appreciate you saying it that way. And so many people are they really enjoyed seeing Alonzo. We're getting good feedback on Alonzo. So we need to increase our ratings. So bring Alonzo back more. Tell us a little bit about, and this may not be fair and you can be as correct as you feel like you need to be, and maybe highlight the positive. But I feel like I really do want to ask the question because you've now, after 7 years, you've been on campus now with, I think, 3 different presidents, at least 2. I guess maybe, no, almost, you served under 3 different presidents, right? Mm-hmm. And so tell us about, hopefully what you'll tell us is the progression of what that looks like. Because I know when I was student body president there, we certainly did our work for the affinity groups and the cultural centers, and part of why I'm so deeply connected to the African American community is because of that work that I did as a student leader, and the relationships that I made when I was a student leader, and the fact that my right-hand person, my mano derecho was Tommy McKinney. Tell us about, at that big university level, what has that progression been like? I mean, you actually might have been, as a student, you were one of the beneficiaries of being one of the first cohorts that actually went through when the administration actually, if I remember correctly, implemented an Office of Equity and Inclusion. And so tell us what that journey has been like in the higher ed setting, specifically as it relates to UNM. both as a student and now as a leader?
Sure. Well, I think in some fairness, the division when I first started had just been created, right? And so it's always a challenge to understand like what is the work going to be when you're first starting up. But I do think that what has been very what has really felt like a breath of fresh air and what has been energizing and motivating is that President Stokes has really centered these experiences and made the conversations intentional and have led to action. Not something that I don't feel that we've seen in other administrations. I think that our full administrative roles on campus, from provost to VP of Equity and Inclusion, president, our athletic director, everybody's willing to get down in the trenches and do the hard work. And that is something that has just been like, it has felt good to call and say, here is an issue, and to have a response say, okay, let's meet about it, or let me get this going so that we can get that taken care of. And that is something that I just don't think we felt before. Perhaps I think because we have a female leader, so I always think that there's a difference there. And it's nice to see our first woman president and her approach to how we handle equity and inclusion work.
And I'll just point out, we also have our first Puerto Rican athletic director serving concurrently with that female first president of the university.
And so, our first Black vice president for equity and inclusion. So we have a lot of firsts. So we're breaking barriers and we're centering diversity, but we're also spreading it out across the campus, and we're not centralizing it in one space. So I think that is what has changed, and I'm just excited about where we'll continue to go. We have a new seal, or we're in the process of our seal, and talking through those. We have a climate group that's coming together to initiate a new climate survey for the campus. So I'm just excited about where UNM will, where our future will be, because I know that we're already moving in the right direction.
I love that. And I my experience at UNM followed an experience at NMSU. And at UNM, I can tell you that in the late 90s, I was in law school from 98, graduated in 2001, almost 20 years ago. Having these types of conversations, there weren't a lot of folks around the table. You had Dr. Torres, who was always willing to engage, who was our Vice President of Student Affairs. You had Dr. Gomez Chavez, you had Dr. Roybal, who didn't have their doctorates at the time, if I remember correctly. They were leading. You had the folks at the ethnic centers that were willing to engage and have hard conversations, but they were, unfortunately, those were early conversations, and so they really didn't get amplified. And so to have you say what you just said is a real source of pride for me. It was a source of pride for me to be able to pass the reins when I was president of the Alumni Association, over to James Lewis, and a phenomenal African-American leader in New Mexico and part of the history of our state in a very substantial way. And he'll be on Cafecito, but as I often have said over the last few weeks, we've been giving him his space as he grieves the loss of his mother. He and I just touched base with each other over the weekend, and he'll be on soon. But, having those leaders, whether it's in the Alumni Association or leaders like Jennifer and Lawrence, and now our Vice President of Equity and Inclusion, look like communities of color, so that when they look up and say, does this university really embrace my experience? Are they going to hear me when I have an issue? If that issue is taken to people who are similarly situated and understand that lived experience, that really matters.
Yeah, and what I think is beautiful? So, we have our everyone's a Lobo, woof, woof, woof. But now we have everyone's a Lobo, and each of us defines all of us. And to me, that's a charge to our community. If each of us defines all of us, then we have to do better so that all of those most marginalized are still being centered. And so I'm just really excited about working at UNM right now.
That is great. Somebody posted in the comments the word I'm trying to embrace right now, but that slogan can be closely tied to the word in Africa that basically says, I am because you are, or something of that nature, but basically talking about the connectivity of our experiences. You know what word I'm trying to think of, Brandi?
I've heard of that before. Let's see if we can find it.
All I can think of is the one in my culture, which is Tikkun Olam, which is to leave the place in a better position than it was when we got here, in the Jewish tradition. But I can't think of it. All right, somebody's going to post it here instantly. You don't have to find it. But so that is super encouraging, and I think we can all be grateful that that structure and that framework was in place, frankly, before this tipping point of the Black Lives Matter movement. Can you speak to what that's been like? You have been, no, that's not the word, Patrick. You're probably close, but that's not the word I'm thinking of.
It's the word Ubuntu.
What's that? Yes. Ubuntu, right? Yes, that's the word I'm thinking of. Starts with a U, and that's exactly the word I was thinking of. Thank you. And Patrick, thanks for that suggestion there. But Brandi got it. Tell us a little bit. You have been on campus and in leadership, at least in terms as an employee of the university, and now in leadership for the entirety of the Black Lives Matter movement. It is a 7-year movement. We've had many flashpoints, what I call flashpoints, and any one of them could have allowed the society around us to embrace those flashpoints as being that tipping point, but we didn't. You've been through that 7 years on campus. What has made this different, and what is different between the murders and the heinous acts that we've all observed over the last 7 years when it comes to brutality and injustice? What's made this different with George Floyd's murder, and what is the texture and the feel on campus now as opposed to then?
I think what's made it different is that we have this like ever-growing pandemic of white supremacy, and we have this pandemic of COVID-19, right? So I think that it has always hurt to see these images and watch these videos, but we still had to get it together and go back to work. And right now, some are not going back to work, and so they're having to sit in that emotion a little bit longer and process through some of that, and process through their authentic feelings of how they're processing. The other part that I think is that we've been warned that Gen X, that's right, is Gen X this generation? Gen X was going to be the ones that were like not going to take it, right? Like we had been seeing for years that they are largely social justice advocates, and so they have paired cancel culture and call out culture in the time of COVID. And so I think that has also changed the way that we've approached things, is that they have said like, we're not doing this anymore.
Real quick, tell us about cancel culture. We haven't talked a lot about that. We've seen some headlines in the last couple of weeks about cancel culture. How do you speak about that on campus to your stakeholders?
So cancel culture is largely when somebody has done something that has not fit the norm. We have canceled them and have said like, we will not subscribe to them. We will not validate them anymore. And call out culture is when we are actually calling out that action of what they are doing. And I think and so I personally am a fan of call out culture over cancel culture, because I think that we need to call out the action and talk about why that was hurtful, because that's restorative justice for our community. So that's the language that we use on campus. And next week, Ms. Tanya Covington is going to be training all of our staff on level 1 restorative justice and mediation training, so that we can do a better job of participating in that call out culture on campus for our students.
That's terrific. And I think that one of the examples I think that a lot of folks can relate to, and even me, in terms of cancel culture, I think, 20, 30 years ago, when we started talking about Ebonics and people who were embracing their language and their vernacular as part of their culture and their heritage and the way they present, it was quickly categorized as a sign of a lack of intellectual capacity. And to me, that has been one of, if I look over time, and as I now better understand cancel culture, to me, that is probably one of the most severe, but also probably one that can be well understood by many, because the whole conversation about Ebonics was one that was very persuasive before you were old enough to even, I mean, the conversation probably continued, but it started before you were probably old enough to be tuned into that conversation. But for people like me who are 50, that was a big deal. And it was I think, a very strong example of cancel culture. So let's talk a little bit more in terms of how the university, your role is going to become, I think, even more critical in the year ahead as we try and figure out what the year ahead is even going to look like. But I think more people are going to be engaged in the conversation and wanting to be a part of doing what's right, because we know better and now we want to do better, right? And so we'll have far more people, hopefully, whether it's in student leadership or whether it's in other stakeholders who want to be involved in being better allies, so that we all feel like we're doing a good job of seeing and hearing such an important part of our community that makes up our multicultural beauty of New Mexico. What are you thinking about in terms of resources, approach, just your role in that? Because I think you've gone from being super important to being even exponentially more important, Brandi.
Well, I think so our work for Black students is not going to change. I don't know, other than finding new ways to connect with students. I just want to, I don't know, I caution them. Sorry, Alonzo's right up in here.
Hey, Alonzo, welcome back, Alonzo. My ratings are going to go up. Stay on camera, buddy.
This has continued to happen. So it's not something new that we are now forced with educating our students with, because we've been doing this work. The thing that is new is that we have so many leaning in from outside of our Black community to be good allies and accomplices. And so as I'm talking to others on our campus, I've cautioned an impulsive reaction to externally do something. Wow. Because I think that first you have to internally sit in those thoughts, and then also sit with your department and talk it out. And so I don't feel comfortable at this moment coming and presenting on how to do better if you have not talked with your staff or your team about how to do better first. And so if you're, obviously we're under some budget constraints, but if your leadership teams and your boards and your statements don't already center this inclusive idea, then you need to have that conversation first before I can come in and help you with anything.
And what resources do you think the university is going to have to help facilitate those conversations? Because I've been contacted by a handful of individuals that said, look, we want to know better so that we can do better and be better, but we don't know where to start. And so I've been providing some connectivity in that space. Is the university having that conversation now about the role it should be playing at that higher ed learning level and being a resource to helping those boards grow and do better and be better?
Absolutely. And I guess I should caution and say that I'm not just like, no, you cannot, like, I will not meet with you, because that's not, I just want for people to have the conversation in their own spaces first, an authentic conversation in their own spaces. And still, certainly we want you to reach out, right? Because we want you to do better, but first have the conversation with your team and talk about where are those spaces that might not feel so welcoming. Secondly, I think the Division of Equity and Inclusion is working on a lot of stuff. And so I don't want to speak for them because I know that they have some stuff that will be coming out, but Dr. Zurai would be a perfect person to speak on some of that.
I think that's fair. I just know that I just question whether or not I question whether internally organizations have the capacity to even have that initial difficult dialogue, right? Like to even recognize where the blind spots are. I mean, I know where the blind spots are on my car, but I'm not sure that if I'm part of an organization that has not had any real touch points on this issue, if they'll be even able to engage their team in where those blind spots and those areas of aggression, or as you put it, where are those areas that we need to even think about or focus on? I'm not sure that we have the capacity or bandwidth to do that.
I think though that there are some areas though that have staff that have seen these things and just haven't had their voice elevated or haven't felt the confidence to speak up about it. And so I actually believe that there are a lot of great people in these organizations that actually do know where their biases are, and they need to say it and not have somebody validate it for them.
I think that's a really good point. But again, see, and that's why you're exhausted. See, because what did that do? It shifted the burden back to you.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're the one that is in the situation. You're the one that identified where that problem is, but you haven't been amplified. So now finally you have to restate the issue, hoping for that amplification. And now the lift is back on you. So hopefully allies will do a better job of inviting that conversation, doing the work to be self-aware and organization aware, so that we can help with that lift. I just, the burden has always been on the oppressed to advance the conversation.
I feel that there are allies though in those spaces that are ready to speak. They just don't feel confident yet speaking up. And we've seen it because we've gone to different departments and had the conversations, and we get the emails later saying, thank you so much. I've been thinking this. I'm glad you brought it up. And so allies, we need you to elevate your voice and get confident in that and just say it.
Right. That's perfect. Thank you for that big green light and piece of encouragement for us. Tell us a little bit more, Brandi, coming from Torrance County and then now you're in the big city. So you've had a super different kind of experience, I'm sure, in both places. But you talked about the severe racism that you experienced in Torrance County as a young woman. Tell us about what that's been like in this community in Albuquerque. We've had a lot of people kind of give us that painful truth that we celebrate the multicultural fabric of New Mexico, and we don't often talk about what those who bring that multicultural experience to our communities have to go through on a regular basis. Even though we're celebrating them publicly, we don't often talk about that ugly underbelly that really exists from where you sit.
And,
sorry, my husband just got on a Zoom call.
It's okay.
My house. So can you repeat the last part of your question? I'm so sorry. Our workspace is the dining room table.
That's all right. That's all right. It's just really kind of, I was hoping you could share with us a little bit more about, as an adult in the big city, looking through the lens of a Black woman who grew up as a Black girl in a community where you experienced overt racism. I mean, I can't sit next to you on the bus because you're Black. You can't come to my house for a sleepover because you're Black. That is a very, very heavy burden to walk into your next stage in life. And now you're doing that next stage in the big community where we talk about celebrating multicultural, the fabric of our community, but we don't often talk about what that actually means for the minorities that make up that multicultural fabric. And it's not as positive as we often like to think, or as we try to celebrate. And so maybe talk to us a little bit about that.
I think one thing that shields me a little bit is that I work in a Black office with Black staff under a division that's super supportive. And so in my work experience, I don't feel those aggressions as much as maybe others who are in other areas of workspaces. But I will say in my own family setting and walking around and going into stores, my husband is a dark-skinned Black man. And so you can still, we can still feel the clerk watching. And I remember in college, my husband was walking back from his walking back to his dorm or back to his apartment, and these white guys drove by and shot him with what are those bullets that have the paint? I can't think of the
paintballs. Yeah,
paintballs and stuff. And so it still exists and it's here. And that was an interesting conversation because my husband's from Jamaica, and so he had always seen himself as a Jamaican and not, he saw himself as a national identity over his like ethnic identity. And so so we've had interesting conversations there now in Albuquerque when there are experiences, and that you're still Black.
I can't imagine. And were you with him when he experienced that being fired at with a paintball marker?
No, but he had called me right after. So it's sad because like you said, like we do pride ourselves in being this multicultural city, but there's still a reality that not everybody embraces that.
That's exactly right. What do you think about as you look at Alonzo, and I'm so glad you're here, Alonzo. Thank you. What's in your heart for Alonzo's future, and how do you contemplate creating a safe space for him, but also a space that he still understands the reality?
That's something that I'm really we're challenged with. So we have really tried to make sure that he has books that have representation of little Black boys that look like him, that we are reaching out to other Black families who have little Black sons so that they're playing together so he can see and feel that community. But I also think that I have to reach out to those that helped mentor me and ask them how they had those conversations with their children, because this is my first son, so I don't know how to do this work, and I do fear that I don't want to expose him too early, but I also don't want him to be so naive. He's a tall little Black kid. His dad is 6'4" and I'm 5'8", so he already looks like he could be 3, almost 4, and he's only 2. So I think I'm just gonna have to reach back into my community to ask those questions.
Yeah, that is fascinating. I really appreciate Tim's comment this morning. He says multiculturalism allows for the erasure of the most important or the most marginalized people in our community who are most important. And I think that's absolutely right, Mr. Green. I appreciate you actually mentioning that, because again, we celebrate this multicultural landscape of New Mexico, but we don't really talk about the lived experiences of those groups that make up that multiculturalism. We don't talk about the international district and that, that quadrant being not quadrant, but that area being the area that has the most African Americans, or the Kirtland edition, and where Aleli teaches. What are we doing for that community to lift it up specifically? Because we just talk about multiculturalism and how much we appreciate it and value it, but we don't talk about what it looks like to be on the other end of that conversation.
Yeah, I think multiculturalism and the I don't see color, I was raised not to see color, are two challenging words that we have to we need to challenge them, and we need to redefine those.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And somebody who I haven't had on, who I have to have on because he's part of my journey big time, is good old Rodney Bowe. And he engaged me years ago with the UNM Men of Color, which was just a phenomenal engagement. Thank you, Rodney. And you're basically, Rodney, celebrating you and just talking about having these courageous conversations with our children, particularly if we come from families such as yours. And so I wanted to really talk a little bit more about that comment that so many privileged white people make, which is, I'm colorblind. I don't even see color. Because I think that I've really started to embrace the idea that that is a substantial part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, I would extend that, because I have heard that more from my Hispanic side of the family than I have heard from white people as well. So I think that we also need to talk about that under the context of this New Mexican Hispanic identity too.
Speak to that, because I know that's your area of work, and you're actually doing some scholarship on that. Speak to that a bit.
Well, Yeah, I will just say that it's not enough to say that you don't see color or you were raised not to see color. You have to validate that that is somebody's experience. I think a lot of students right now, particularly biracial students, are hearing from their other side of the family, well, I love you, I don't see color. And these kids are saying, see me, like, I need you to see me, I need you to validate me. And their family is still choosing to say, I don't see color, I was raised not to see color. And what we need to shift it to is, I see you and I validate you, and I will not change the way I treat you based on your color. And so that's where we need to change some of that language.
I appreciate that. I see you and I validate you. I really appreciate that. Tell me, you know, I do a good job of interrupting my guests, and sometimes they come to Cafecito con Colon saying to themselves, I really hope I get a chance to share this with Brian and his viewers. Is there anything that you wanted to share that I maybe didn't give you a chance to talk about that you think would be enriching and enlightening for the 1,000 people that by tomorrow morning will have watched this video with you, Brandi?
I just would like to add that it's also Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. So just be mindful as you're reaching out to your Black friends and family that you want to learn how to do better, that you're also protecting their space and their mental health, because this is a lot of work and it is tiring work. And we know that so many people, so many leaders in our community have died from the stress put on them, in addition to the underlying health conditions, but the stress has exacerbated that. So I just ask that for all of our allies and accomplices to take a little bit of action first, and then reach out to your Black friends and families to understand how to do better. But do some self-reflection, have the conversation at your dinner table. If you have not had a conversation with your wife or your husband or your spouse, your children about race, and you are talking that, and you're asking somebody else to have the conversation about how to do better, please first at your table.
That is excellent. That is excellent advice, Brandi. Thank you. I'm so glad that I asked you to share that with us, and I appreciate it. Mental health and behavioral health is such a huge issue in our community, and the support system for those who are suffering and are trying to cope and deal with those issues. That landscape was decimated over the last decade, and we're trying to repair it over the last couple of years, and we've got a lot of work to do. So particularly, let's make sure we're reaching out to our sisters and brothers who are of color, who really, they're exhausted, and the work's not done yet. So let's keep on pushing. Brandi, thanks for joining us on Cafecito con Colon. It's going to be a great week. We've got, I think, Chief Clarence Smith is going to join us sometime this week. I know that Leon Howard's going to be on with us. So we'll have another great week of guests on Cafecito con Colon, where we're amplifying strong Black voices and voices of Black women and men who are making a difference in our community by helping educate us about their lived experience. And that's exactly what future PhD Brandi Stone has done for us today. We appreciate you bringing on Alonzo as our special guest of honor. Give your husband our best regards. Tell him we're sorry we interrupted his Zoom meeting today. And folks, make sure you say thanks to Brandi, and look, reach out to a few people, particularly people of color who are isolated right now. Make sure that they know they're not alone. That Brandi Stone and Brian Colon send their best from Cafecito con Colon. Make it a great day. We'll see you again tomorrow at 9 a.m. Thanks, everybody. Brandi, thank you for being on our show. You were awesome.
Thank you.
Have a great day, Brandi. Call me anytime.
Okay, thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye, Alonzo. Bye.